time, a dictator is denying his people that same path forward. And we are standing with the Libyan people as they brave bombs and bullets to demand that Gaddafi must go now without further violence or delay. Our diplomats are hard at work with our allies and partners, including in the United Nations, NATO, the African Union, the Arab League, the Gulf Cooperation Council, to isolate, sanction, and pressure Gaddafi to stop the violence against his own people, and to send a clear message to those around Gaddafi who continue to enable this horrific attack on his own people, that they too will be held accountable if they commit crimes against the Libyan people.
Well, let's stay with the U.S. now, where a congressional hearing into radicalization of America's Muslims has led to widespread accusations of Islamophobia. It's been called by Republican Congressman Peter King. The debate has raised concerns about religious intolerance in U.S. politics. But King says the purpose of the hearings is to inform, not to inflame. The U.S. state of Wisconsin has pushed through a Republican plan to curb the union rights of public workers. The contentious measure to address budget deficits follows weeks of angry protests. The state governor has promised to quickly sign the bill into law. Similar reforms are being considered in several other states. And to discuss this further, we're joined now by John Nichols in Wisconsin's capital, Madison. He's associate editor of the state's daily newspaper. Did you ever expect this Republican plan to be passed?
Well, the Republican governor has majorities in the legislature, in both houses of the legislature. So he was in a position that he should have been able to pass it. But it was delayed now for the better part of a month. And there was an incredible popular uprising against it. And it did make some of us suspect that it might not go through. But they yesterday and into today, they basically restructured how the legislature deals with these issues and very hastily passed it. So it has gone through a very controversial move. There were literally thousands, maybe even in the tens of thousands of people in the streets today to protest against the passage.
Why such opposition? Give us an idea of just how it's going to affect workers' rights.
Well, this will make it almost impossible to organize and maintain a union in the public sector. So organizing state employees and local employees and organizing teachers into unions will become very, very hard. It will still be something that still can be done, but the unions will not be able to maintain their strength through economics because the law makes it very, very difficult for them to collect money from their members. It also requires them to recertify or to reform the union every year. As a result, those barriers are going to be some of the toughest restrictions on union organizing in the United States.
Now, the Republican argument, of course, is that the states need to balance their books. They need to address their debt-ridden budgets. Is this not a fair argument?
Well, I mean, it's always a fair argument, but the question is, where do you go for your revenues? Do you cut public employees? Do you cut services? Do you cut education? Or do you tax the wealthy? Do you tax big corporations? Now, obviously, the unions say that there should be a little more taxation to maintain these services, to maintain these jobs. And, of course, the Republicans say that, no, they don't want any more taxes. So it's really a classic political debate, but played out in a new way as regards public services.
And do you see this spreading throughout other states in America?
There's simply no question it is spreading. This is a new strategy that the Republican Party has begun to implement following last year's elections when they did very, very well, especially at the state level. There are already similar proposals in Ohio and to some extent in Indiana with similar protests in those states as well.
John Nichols, thanks very much for joining us there from Wisconsin. You're watching Al Jazeera, still ahead.
I'm Nazanin Mashiri in Gafsa in southern Tunisia. I'll be reporting on the economic roots of this uprising.
And almost a year after Thailand's army crushes a rebellion, we meet a father still searching for answers.
As the hot spell extends across the Gulf, we'll still make sure you feel refreshed.
Welcome back to your international weather forecast. Well, across India, we are looking at fairly clear conditions all the way from the north down to the south. What we are seeing, though, is very warm conditions indeed. As you can see here, most of the temperatures across the region are in the mid to upper 30s. Really, you need to go up to New Delhi to get into the 20s, and we are looking at about 29 degrees there. Kathmandu, about 24 degrees. But out towards the Bay of Bengal, we need to watch this area very closely of rain as it makes its way towards the west. Sri Lanka, you could be seeing some very heavy rain showers over the next several days. Down towards the southern part of Africa, we were watching this area of low pressure in the Mozambique Channel. That has now moved onshore to Mozambique, causing some very heavy rain showers there. We are looking at about 200 millimeters or more of rain, so that means some localized flooding in their forecast over the next several days. And then up towards the Arabian Peninsula, temperatures are now coming up, so we are seeing those temperatures rise. Doha, about 29 degrees. Abu Dhabi is going to be hitting about 33. Very heavy rain showers up towards Iran. You can see that. But we are looking at some slight rain showers down to the south. Not really picking it up here on the forecast map, but as you can see, Mecca about 30 degrees, as well as Riyadh, 29 degrees for them. And a little bit further towards the north, we are looking at some very windy conditions across most of Iran for them, as well as temperatures for Baghdad, 21.
Qatar Airways, world's 5-star airline.
On the next Rizkan show, celebrated and controversial French philosopher Bernard-Henri Lévy gives a first-hand perspective on the battle for Libya's soul. Rizkan, at this time on Al Jazeera.
14 competing teams, 13 different venues, 3 host nations. Cricket is part of the fabric of life here, and this competition is the pinnacle of the one-day game. We'll be bringing you all the action and reaction from India, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. The Cricket World Cup on Al Jazeera.
Hello again. Our top stories. Forces loyal to Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi have launched new airstrikes on the eastern oil towns of Ras Lanuf and Brega. Arab Gulf states have joined many Western countries in their condemnation of the Libyan regime. Ministers from the region say Gaddafi's government has lost legitimacy and have backed calls for a no-fly zone. Al Jazeera's Anita McNaught is in Tripoli with more.
The Gaddafi regime baring its teeth, both in its rhetoric and in its military action. Zawiya, the town to the west of Tripoli, now in ruins. Rebel fighters in the east talking of hundreds dead. A hospital in Ras Lanuf bombed in an airstrike. And the Western powers now pushing the idea of a no-fly zone between committees. NATO saying it won't act without UN Security Council support. Permanent members Russia and China, with the power of veto, highly unlikely to give that support. The International Committee of the Red Cross is now calling this a civil war. Libya is getting used once again